Two quick things. It's good to compare, isn't it? So we could just see who's doing the job they're elected to and who is, well, in another way, how to win an argument, as in Jamie Raskin, how to lose an argument, as in Matt Gaetz. I'm going with Jamie Raskin all day long. And should I whisper this bit? We have a team that sometimes I like to treat to a coffee. If you could press the thanks button, and I'm a bit embarrassed saying this, help me out, much appreciated, then we can bring you more stuff every day. Thank you. Thanks button.
The women with the least likelihood of getting pregnant are the ones most worried about having abortions.
Matt, you seem like a guy that enjoys spending time with a woman. So why are you so angry at them?
Nobody wants to impregnate you if you look like a thumb. I don't get it.
Are you mad because you have to pay for sex? Allegedly.
You're like 5'2", 350 pounds.
Matt, stop.
It almost seems like you're trying to yell loud enough that no one will see you've been hiding something. What are you compensating for?
A few of them need to get up and march, swing those arms, get the blood pumping, maybe mix in a salad.
But Matt, you don't have to yell that loudly. And that secret you're so worried about people discovering, that's not fair.
I've got some serious questions to ask you. The chairman of the January 6th committee, Chairman Thompson, and John Katko, who was the emissary of Kevin McCarthy, negotiated an agreement for an independent outside commission with 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, equal subpoena power, right down the middle. And yet Donald Trump decided he didn't like it because he doesn't want anybody investigating January the 6th. So he turned against it, and then the Republican leadership flipped over and turned against it. I think you voted against that commission. Why did you vote against that commission?
For many of the reasons that I've discussed today, that the focus on January 6th, the
so you don't want to know
is unwarranted.
You don't want to know anymore.
Look, I think we have.
Okay, let me ask you about that.
We have a process in Article 3 where the courts get to determine those issues. If the United States government brings charges, people can resolve those in the courts.
You don't want to know.
That's not okay with you guys because you want
Mr.
to politicize it because you.
I know you too well for this. You don't want to know the answer. You don't want to know.
You guys don't have an answer.
So let me, Mr. Gaetz, let me ask you. Let me ask you a serious question.
The stenographer is trying to take people's words down, and she can't if everybody talks over each other. Okay. So
our apologies to the stenographer.
Okay,
we're going to do it civilly, like 2 lawyers. Okay, Mr. Gaetz, let me ask you this. Let's say that the exact same attack had taken place. Let's assume 145 of our officers were beaten in the face with baseball bats, steel pipes, Confederate battle flags, etc. Let's say they interrupted the counting of electoral college votes for the first time in American history for 4 or 5 hours. Let's say marauders, insurrectionists came into our building and chanted for hanging Vice President Mike Pence. But let's just change the hypothetical. This one element, Mr. Gaetz. Let's say it wasn't the Proud Boys. Let's say it wasn't the Oath Keepers. Let's say it wasn't the 3 percenters. Let's say it wasn't the Aryan nations. Let's say it was Al-Qaeda or ISIS. Would you really not want an investigation into what happened with that attack on America?
If Al-Qaeda or ISIS attacked the U.S. Capitol, I would think that the least capable institution to bring them to justice would be this January 6th committee.
You would not want...
I would far prefer the legal process to play out or the military process to play out. If the American people had to rely on the Congress itself as an institution to protect us from ISIS, without law enforcement, without the military, we would be in deep, deep trouble.
Okay, is that a new position for you and Mr. Jordan? Because I know you guys have been involved...
It's a new hypothetical.
Yeah, you've been involved in a lot of different investigations, both of you. For example, does Benghazi ring a bell?
I was, I believe, a law student at the Great William and Mary Law School.
All right. Well, but before I come to Mr. Jordan, let me ask you this: do you think that people who are subpoenaed by a court or by the United States Congress, who think in their head that they might have a privilege or someone else might have a privilege, have the right just not to show up?
I believe that people have the right to allow the legal process to resolve whether
but you know how that works, Mr. Gaetz. You're a lawyer. You know how that works. You show up.
It works too.
Wait a second, Mr. Gaetz. Wait, hold on. Let's try to educate the public here.
Please.
Because people need to know. If you're subpoenaed, you go. If you think you have a privilege, for example, let's say Steve Bannon says, you know what, I'm guilty as hell. I don't want to testify against myself. In America, you don't have to. The Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination says, I plead the Fifth. I might incriminate myself, but you know what? You got to go. And you got to answer each specific question. Some of them might implicate your Fifth Amendment rights, and some of them might not. Even if he thinks he's got, in some surreal parallel universe, a presidential executive privilege, even though he didn't even work for the White House at that point. He'd been fired by Donald Trump in August of 2017. This is in January of 2021, in December of 2020. But even if he thought that, he's got to come before the committee, and he has to plead it. Do you not agree with that?
No, I think that...
No, honestly, do you not agree with that?
Hold on, Mr.
Yeah.
Raskin, I allowed you to speak, and I didn't interrupt you. I hope I'm given the same opportunity.
Just give me an honest answer.
The honest answer is that the McGahn litigation that you and I both followed closely as members of the Judiciary Committee actually is the path forward. McGahn didn't have to show up to assert that he was waiting for legal...
The president asserted executive privilege on his behalf.
Now you're the one giving challenges to the stenographer. So,
No, I'm telling you, wait a second. I'm going to elaborate on your answer
No,
here.
but I haven't even given my full answer yet.
That's not how it works in the Rules Committee, Mr. Gates. Just follow this then.
Well, wait,
the president.
do I get to respond to these?
Mr. Gates, I'm going to give you the chance to respond.
Well, it doesn't
Respond
sound like it. It sounds like you
President
monologue
Trump
and then they
asserted
complain about the
executive privilege.
stenographer if I respond.
President Trump asserted executive privilege for McGahn. President Biden has not asserted.
I believe there is.
Has not asserted executive privilege.
President Trump has initiated litigation. Look, the
So-
reason you all waited on McGahn is because the Russia hoax wasn't going well for you. And the reason you're not
Okay,
waiting
all
now
right.
is because you have no other legislation
Blah, blah,
or
blah.
other solutions
Okay.
for the country.
All right,
That's why
Mr. Jordan, let me switch
you
to you.
had the McGahn playbook, but you've ditched it because you guys need January 6th so bad.
I'm from Colorado, Mr. Buck.
And with the chairman's permission, I defer to Mr. Gates from Florida.
Mr. Gates is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is my favorite subcommittee in my half-decade in Congress, and in no small part because of the way you've led it. I am incredibly proud of the work we have done to address some of these anti-competitive practices of these monopolistic entities. And I was particularly persuaded by the testimony of Mr. Gross regarding how that market power of big businesses like Amazon can limit the ability of workers to have any type of meaningful negotiation. Congresswoman Jayapal led legislation that the chairman of the committee, the chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Buck, and myself supported that would force the breakup of companies like Amazon into smaller entities. And I wanted Mr. Gross's perspective on that. Do you believe, as a negotiator, that would improve the position of workers to break up companies like Amazon and other big tech companies into smaller entities?
Well, I'm not an expert on this field. You know, obviously I'm just a driver at UPS and the shop steward for my union. But what I would say though is that it might not necessarily be necessary to break up the size of the company, but just to allow or force the company or encourage the company to employ the workers that it's utilizing. So instead of using third-party individuals and leaning on them and chewing them up and spitting them out, have real employees, you know, give them real wages, allow them to have a collective bargaining unit agreement. And I think that way you would get more productivity out of them in the long run and still be able to run a successful business.
I appreciate that perspective. My concern is that if they're able to stay so big, even if we used the awesome powers of the federal government to force these relationships out of independent contractor relationships into employment relationships, they're still so big that they could reduce the contributions of those employees with the strength that they have. And it is one of the reasons why we had bipartisan support on this committee for those bills. But Mr. Chairman, I'm deeply disappointed that those bills haven't been called up for a vote. It seems a bit odd to be here talking about positive impacts of legislation the subcommittee has passed when the full House has had the opportunity in prior weeks to take up these bills and they haven't. And I have to wonder why that has happened. And so, Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a piece from the New York Times entitled "Tech Giants Fearful of Proposals to Curb Them, Blitz Washington with Lobbying."
Without objection.
And so that could be a reason, the power of lobbyists in this town to make things tougher for workers. I guess there could be other reasons too. Mr. Chairman, I would seek to enter into the record a piece from Yahoo News entitled "Tim Cook Reportedly Called Pelosi to Deliver a Warning About Congress's Antitrust Bills."
Without objection.
So maybe it's the lobbyists, maybe it's the power of these very powerful CEOs making personal calls, but it could even be something more sinister. Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a Fortune.com piece entitled "Nancy Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband cashed in on big tech just as Congress was set to pounce.
Without objection.
And in that article, there's discussion of the spouse of the Speaker of the House making a $6 million call on stocks that netted $5.3 million while we're not moving these bills. So I thought that was a little odd. I thought that was weird. We moved bipartisan legislation out of this subcommittee, and just as we're considering it, and it might be bad for big tech, the Speaker's spouse goes and buys all this big tech stock, and then lo and behold, here we are with the bills not called up. And it just makes you wonder, did somebody know something? Was somebody acting on information? And it could have been the power of the lobbyists and all the money that they donate to members of Congress on both sides. It could have been people like Tim Cook calling, but here's what we know. These bills aren't coming to the floor. If they were coming to the floor, they would have been on the floor in prior weeks. And so now we sit here with this great work likely extinguished in its tracks for one of these unfortunate reasons. And Mr. Chairman, I know we've got Chairman Nadler's MORE Act coming up soon, and one thing we learned in the marijuana movement is sometimes you got to lose votes on the floor. Sometimes you got to put up the votes, you got to lose, and then year after year you make a little progress, you get further down the road. And even if these tech bills can't pass, I would encourage you to talk to the Speaker and put them up for a vote. And I know she said she won't put up votes that don't pass, but if it could at least give us a measuring tool to be able to come back and work to persuade our other members. I thank the chairman for his indulgence for going over time, and I yield back.
And I want to reassure the gentleman that I am working very closely with the ranking member of the subcommittee to be sure that our colleagues who have not had the benefit of the 16-month study that we conducted, where we, I think, learned a lot about this marketplace, understood what these complicated bills do. We want to be sure that our colleagues are fully briefed up, and we are committed to making certain these bills come to the floor, not just for a vote, but for a vote that prevails because of the hard work that's been done, and we are grateful for your ongoing and strong support. But this is an important priority for me, I know for all the Democrats in our caucus, and certainly for the chair of the full Judiciary Committee, and working very closely with Mr. Buck to be sure we get to that point. And thank you again for your support of our investigation and the legislation. And with that, I now go to the gentleman.
The 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says that the validity of the public debt shall not be questioned. And we've made a commitment to every Social Security recipient in America, to the Medicare and Medicaid recipients, to the veterans, to the bondholders of the United States, that we would pay their debts as we are fiscally, morally, politically, and constitutionally required to do. And yet, Donald Trump has issued the order. He said it's inevitable. Default on the debt of the United States for the first time in American history. Crash the economy. Lose 9 or 10 million jobs. And so now, in the words of Florida Representative Matt Gaetz, who appears not to be here right now, the GOP will not negotiate with their hostage. Who's the hostage? The American people are the hostage. Our government is hostage. The Constitution is hostage. So I want to introduce the MAGA Republicans who have split today, but who increased the debt ceiling 3 times under Donald Trump, who gave us a quarter of all the debt of the United States between George Washington and Joe Biden. I want to introduce them to the Constitution of the United States. The validity of the public debt shall not be questioned. We had no federal strategy, and I remember in Congress we were begging for a national strategy. And then there were all kinds of conflicting signals sent out about hydroxychloroquine. This will disappear in April. This will all go away. China's doing a great job. I'm in constant touch with China and so on. What should the federal government have done, and what can we do next time in the early months of a pandemic to prevent like this rapid spread?
The federal government next time needs to own the problem from the beginning. As you said, nationalize the supply chain, ensure that every nursing home in the country has adequate supplies, personal protective equipment, rapid testing. We also need to support the workforce. Far too many nursing homes had staff shortages. Staff were getting sick. Staff left in large numbers. We lost hundreds of thousands of staff. This was the most dangerous job in America. It was there were incredibly high death rates, and so staff, not surprisingly, went to work for in other parts of the economy.
I was watching President Trump's town hall meeting on CNN last week, and I saw two remarkable things that clarified in my mind what's happening here. First, I saw Donald Trump blame Vice President Pence for failing to steal the election for him on January 6th. As Trump emphasized on January 6th, he believed, and he continues to believe, that Pence did not have, quote, the courage to do what needed to be done. Moreover, Trump assured his cult followers that Pence was never in any danger from the invading mob chanting "Hang Mike Pence," and all the violence was Pence's own fault for not succumbing to Trump and becoming the first vice president in our history to step outside of his constitutional role and declare the president the winner against the actual electoral college vote. You see, that's what Pence gets for not doing what he was told by Donald Trump. But we also saw Trump castigate and blame Jean Carroll, the woman he sexually abused in a department store and later lied about and defamed. Trump called her a whack job and asked what kind of woman meets somebody and brings them up, and within minutes you're playing hanky-panky in a dressing room. You see, he thinks it's her fault that he sexually abused her. And watching these two glaring cases of the GOP frontrunner for the presidential nomination in 2024 blaming the victim for his crime made me see what's happening with these hearings on Washington. They're part of an effort to deny Americans who live in Washington the right to participate in representative government, and then to blame them for their own disenfranchisement and their own lack of representation in Congress. The real question for the Congress of the United States is, will we do for the people of Washington, D.C., tax-paying, draftable citizens who have served in every war that the Republic has ever fought, going back to the American Revolution, will we treat them the same way that we treated the people of 37 other states who were admitted by the original 13? That is the dynamic of enlargement of democracy that was contemplated by the framers of the Constitution and the founders of the country. They did not want there to be large colonized, subjected populations subject to the will of other people for precisely the kind of reason that is on display today. There's no reason why the local government of Washington should be lorded over and superintended by other people's representatives, no matter how well-intended they may be, or how politically intended they may be, or how malevolently intended they may be. The framers of the Constitution, the people who fought the American Revolution, rejected the idea of virtual representation.
While allowing Hunter Biden to exploit women. This is a shame. But let's talk about...
Chairman, there's a parliamentary challenge before us.
The point of order.
Chairman, point of order.
Who's the point? And we'll stop the clock for you, Ms. Green.
Mr. Chairman, our colleague from Georgia has introduced before pornographic exhibits and displayed things that are really not suitable for children who might be watching. And
bathing suit's not suitable, Mr. Raskin?
Well, I'm saying I would like the member to be instructed to not introduce any pornography today, at least without running it through the chair
bathing suit is not pornography,
Well, we
Mr.
can't
Raskin.
see it from down there, so you didn't make it available to the minority before you started.
I've seen it before. It's on the internet. It's everywhere.
You are submitting a naked woman's body.
This is a bathing suit. This is a bathing suit.
And it has not been clear before this committee.
Glasses on. Do you wear them or not?
I have contacts in. Thank you.
Congratulations.
All right. Chair, ask Ms. Green to proceed.
Now let's talk about more
answers. They're not the answers I would have given for 1 minute. They didn't show any common sense at all. But guess who's not showing any common sense right now? People in Congress who are about to get swept away with Elise Stefanik's McCarthy-like crusade. She wants to dictate who's going to be college president or university president in private colleges across America. Are these really the worst offenders? A Haitian American president at Harvard, a Jewish American president at MIT? Has she done a complete study of racism and anti-Semitism in the campuses? Because she was giving hypothetical questions. There might be some real cases of anti-Semitic violence or racist abuse that are taking place there. And what about the campuses where there's sexual harassment and sexual violence, where presidents are looking the other way? Is that going to be our new job? If it is, let's do it systematically and give people some due process rights. In the meantime, the boards of Harvard and MIT have been standing by their presidents, and I don't think the Congress of the United States needs to be dictating to them who should resign and who shouldn't.
Your larger point, though, however, that if anti-Semitism is ugly on a campus, it's also ugly when it's Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene standing at a white supremacist conference.
Well, and by the way, Marjorie Taylor Greene goes to Nicholas Fuentes' conferences,
right, and so does
Paul Gosar.
Yeah.
What does brave Ms. Stefanik have to say about that? Is she such a champion against anti-Semitism that she's willing to speak out about her own colleagues?
It's either anti-Semitism offending you all the time, or none of the time. You can't have it. It only offends you when it's on the left or on the right, depending on where you stand. Democratic Congressman.
I mean, Donald Trump is calling the shots across the board. He thinks he can shut down his indictments and the work of the special counsel and the Department of Justice and the federal courts by getting Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and 3 other members of the MAGA caucus to derail the House and shut down the government of the United States. He's badly mistaken because the Attorney General, Jack Smith, the prosecutors are funded by a continuing indefinite appropriation to the Department of Justice, and they're exempted because the Attorney General is a presidential appointee. And the federal courts themselves are open for business for criminal trials because they relate to the protection of life, property, and public safety. So he's going to shut down all the rest of the U.S. government in order to blockade his prosecutions, but it's not even going to work. And Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, who wants to run for governor of Florida, according to all the Republicans I serve with, should figure out right now that they're just going to end their political careers by shutting down the government for no reason. They should tell Donald Trump his plan is not going to work.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter information for the record.
What's the information?
Oh, very good.
State the information.
Thank you.
I reserve the right to object. The minority has not provided a copy of the material for the record. In the past, she's displayed pornography. Is pornography allowed to be, or pornographic photos allowed to be displayed in this committee room, Mr. Chairman?
It's not pornography.
Okay, well, you're the expert.
I'm not an expert, Mr. Raskin.
Seems like it.
Mr. Chairman, I object to the unanimous
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
Chairman.
All you need is one objection.
We need decorum. I'm gonna let the lady state, and then if you object still, we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Reverend Sharpton, your current MSNBC co-worker, Joe Scarborough, is my former congressman. And when Joe Scarborough served in the Congress, he had quite a bit to say about your contribution to the national discussion. It was in the 106th Congress that Joe Scarborough filed House Concurrent Resolution 270 entitled Condemning the Racist and Anti-Semitic Views of the Reverend Al Sharpton. Mr. Scarborough's resolution began by saying, whereas the Reverend Al Sharpton has referred to members of the Jewish faith as blood-sucking Jews and Jew bastards. So my question to you is, does Mr. Scarborough's assertion that you said these things, is that true, or did you not say those things?
They are patently untrue. I never said that.
Okay.
Can I finish my answer?
No, it's actually my time, but you will be able to.
Well, I thought you raised the question.
So the next question
relates
to
answer
Mr. Scarborough's second comment. He says, whereas the Reverend...
Since aspersions were cast on the witness will be permitted to answer.
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Aspersions weren't cast. I asked the witness...
You asked, was it true that I said that?
I can't reclaim my time, Mr. Chairman.
Witness, you will have your time. The witness will be permitted to answer.
You asked me, was that true? And the answer is no, that was not true. And as you know, Mr. Scarborough and I work very closely together. He comes to National Action Network conventions. I think he's a great guy, and we do each other's shows often.
Mr. Scarborough also said...
Excuse me. The gentleman who's the timekeeper will add 30 seconds to Mr. Gates' time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman will state his parliamentary inquiry.
Is it appropriate for a member of the body to personally attack a witness before the body? Or shall I say, can a congressman's words be taken down in the event that he casts aspersions on a witness?
We ask everyone to adhere to rules of decorum. The gentleman will proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe Scarborough then wrote, whereas the Reverend Al Sharpton has referred to members of the Jewish faith as white interlopers and diamond merchants. Have you ever referred to members of the Jewish faith as white interlopers or diamond merchants?
No, sir. I referred to one in Harlem, an individual who I didn't even know was Jewish, as an interloper, and said I should never refer to his race. I said that I was against those that were using apartheid diamonds. And when I did a funeral in Crown Heights in '91, because we were boycotting Oppenheimer and those that were selling diamonds from apartheid South Africa.
Thank
in
you,
the
Mr.
same
Scarborough. I'm
sermon,
gonna
I'm
reclaim
trying
my
to,
time.
may I
Mr. Scarborough
finish my answer,
continues-
sir?
No,
Am I allowed to finish my answer?
I'm allowed to reclaim my time.
You asked a question and I'm answering it.
Yeah, I got a few more.
Well, and I have a few more answers.
I can't wait.
Well, apparently you do because you don't want me to answer.
No, I want to
So
know.
since you raised it, let me finish.
And I have
I
a
also
right to
talked
ask
about
you
people
questions.
snatching
It's a
pocketbooks
by talking
that are in the,
over me. That
I'm
is
not
how this is gonna
filibustering
work,
anything.
Reverend.
I'm answering your question.
Everyone will
Chairman.
suspend, please.
Mr. Chairman, a parliamentary inquiry.
Everyone will suspend.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Gentlelady will state a parliamentary inquiry.
It will be in the form of an inquiry statement. Is it appropriate for a member to do a constant tirade of attacking the witness and then not allowing the witness to answer?
That is not, my personal opinion is that it's not proper, but that is not a proper parliamentary inquiry. The
That's a
gentleman controls the time.
statement to the
The gentleman controls the time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Scarborough continued, whereas the Reverend Al Sharpton led a protest in the Crown Heights neighborhood and marched next to a protester with a sign that read, "The white man is the devil." Did you march next to a sign that said...
I have no recollection of that. I've marched in many things where there were signs that I did or did not agree with.
Scarborough
and
continues, whereas the
and
Reverend
I
Al
would
Sharpton's
say that
vicious
if I
verbal
was
and
aware of that, I would have said
I asked him my
that
time
I would
to
not want
have the
to
opportunity
have that
question the
sign.
witness and not just have him continue to...
Well, then you shouldn't ask me a question if you don't want an
I
answer.
want to know if you said them. You could say yes or no. You said
No,
them.
I cannot answer Mr. Chairman on yes or no when he's
I
asking
asked him
me
my time
whether or
to
not
restored. The witness is obviously disrupting the committee.
the witness. First of all, this has nothing to do with policing.
Mr. Chairman,
Since he
right.
wants to,
It's outrageous.
since he wants to make the subject Joe Scarborough and I, then let me answer it. It had nothing. Last I know, Joe Scarborough nor I are members of the police department or have anything to do with excessive force.
What is outrageous?
But I'm loving to engage this if he lets me finish.
What is outrageous is a matter of opinion. The gentleman controls the time.
Mr. Chairman, I asked that a minute be restored.
The gentleman controls the time.
So you're not going to restore my time?
No.
Joe Scarborough continues, the Reverend Al Sharpton's fierce demagoguery incited violence, riots, and murder in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
As a matter of fact, the New York State did a extensive study on the Crown Heights riots. Said I was not even there until after there was death of Yanko Roosevelt. I was not even called by the family until the day after.
Thank you, Mr.
We
Chairman.
had nothing to do with it. When I came to
Mr.
Crown
Sharpton, have
Heights,
you ever
I led the
referred-
first nonviolent march there.
Are you really? All right, fine. Mr. Sharpton, have you ever referred to African Americans who disagree with you as cocktail sip Negroes?
I have.
Have you ever referred to African Americans who
Mr.
disagree
Chairman,
with you?
I have a parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman will state his parliamentary inquiry.
If a congressperson is persistently questioning a witness about a non-germane matter, is it proper?
I think the gentleman makes a fair point, but the rules provide members with very wide latitude.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Gentleman will state his parliamentary inquiry.
Does it violate any rules of decorum for a member to read specifically verbatim from a document filed in the congressional records as a resolution?
The gentleman from Florida may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have you ever referred to African Americans who disagree with you as yellow and then the N-word?
I don't know that I've referred to people as names. I don't know if it's because they disagree with me, but I have said things about blacks and whites. I'm glad you made it clear that I don't only attack whites. Thank you for that.
Have you ever said that? Have you ever referred to African Americans who disagree with you as Negro militants?
I didn't know that was a derogatory statement.
I didn't say it was, just asked if you used it.
I don't know. I don't recall.
Have you ever said, if the Jews want to get it on, tell them to pin their yarmulkes back and come over to my house?
No, there was a man named Mordecai Levy who had been charged with some terrorist acts who threatened to march on me and several other activists in New Jersey. And he said he was going to come deal with my hairstyle. And I'm referring to his hairstyle. I said for him to pin it and come on. I was not talking about all Jews.
Well, you
no.
said those words.
No, I said about Mordecai Levy.
Have you said, I'm in hell already, I'm in Israel?
Yeah, because I had been threatened that if I came over to deal
one more
with
question.
first of all,
I believe in
I believe that you can deal with the decorum of the Congress, but you cannot disrespect a witness. You cannot answer a question, ask a question, and tell the witness he can't answer the question.
Is permitted to answer a question.
You're welcome to answer them. How about
Well, then let me answer, sir.
Okay.
Let me answer, because I'm enjoying this. I think that you have.
You're at a committee about policing.
Don't get upset. Calm down. Calm down. You're yelling. Calm down. I think that I'm trying to answer your last question.
Gentlemen will be permitted. The time of the gentleman has expired. The witness may answer the question.
The one about offing the pigs. Answer that one.
The witness may answer the question. The time of the gentleman has expired. The witness may answer the question.
The question that he raised, what I was saying was clearly that I have disagreed with blacks and whites. I've used language graphically sometime to do so, some of which I've grown beyond, but none of which shows anything other than I am an equal opportunity attacker. And I'm glad that Joe Scarborough and I both are equal opportunity attackers that now work together.
Mr. Chairman, I ask to be recognized for unanimous consent request.
The gentleman will be stated as unanimous consent request.
Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to introduce the Scarborough resolution as part of the committee's permanent record.
I object. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion.
Now that
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I was reviewing your prior answer, Reverend Sharpton. You are cited in a Washington Examiner piece, July 30th, 2019, as having said, if the Jews want to get it on, tell them to pin their yarmulkes back and come over to my house. And in your response to my question, you said you were just referring to one person. So here is my very limited question for you, Reverend. Were you misquoted in this story when you say the Jews and them, referring to a plural group of people rather than one person you seem to have a grievance with?
Am I allowed to answer? My name is Sharpton, not Lewandowski. I will answer the question if I'm allowed.
Please. We know your name, sir. Go ahead and answer.
And you then know that I'm going to answer. I was referring to an incident and a threat to come to my home by Mordecai Levy and to the homes of, I believe, Reverend Daughtry and others. How the Examiner, I think you said, or someone else wrote, I'm not looking at it, so I do not know whether they misquoted me or not. I do know what I said and who I was referring to.
Well, did you say them?
I just said that I'm not looking at the statement. I do not. You're talking about a situation that happened in 1991. If I said them, the, or those, I don't know. I know that incident and I know what I was referring to. And a man threatening to come to our home who had that kind of criminal record. And I had 2 young children, I think under 5 years old.
Thank you. I appreciate the answer.
Again, I'm not Lewandowski. Let me talk. I'll talk. I'll testify before this committee.
So is it your belief that
if I said them or not, would that help or hurt excessive force of policing?
Well, I think it's pretty significant when someone wants to come and preach to us.
Mr. Chairman, point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
point
Chairman.
of parliamentary inquiry. Point of parliamentary inquiry.
Someone else did first. The gentleman will state his point of
I don't believe you talk about the people that come before you.
The gentleman will suspend. The gentleman will state his point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Chairman, when a witness is asked a question in a hearing before this Judiciary Committee, do our rules provide that the witness is permitted to answer the question?
The witness is permitted to answer the question.
I have a parliamentary
But the member controls the time.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Hold on. The member controls the time. If the member judges that the question is answered to his satisfaction, he may go on to another question. The gentlelady will state her point of parliamentary inquiry.
When a witness is attempting to answer the question, is it the rules of this committee that the witness be allowed to answer the question? And is it also in the decorum of this committee to not badger the witness if the witness is attempting to answer the question?
The member, well, there are two answers. The member controls the time. If the member thinks that the question has been answered to his satisfaction, he may cut off the answer and go to a further question. However, it is not permitted to badger a witness. We do afford members considerable latitude, but badgering witnesses is inappropriate, and our committee should not conduct itself in that manner. It is expected that all parties to these proceedings comport themselves with decorum and professionalism, and at all times in a manner that reflects creditably on the House of Representatives. House rules require the chair to maintain order and decorum, and I will do so. The gentleman controls the time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ain't having no march. I believe in fighting. Well, fight then. Ain't nobody holding you. I'll off the man. We'll off him. Plenty of crackers walking around here tonight. Did you say those words?
I do not recall saying I will not march. I think for the last 40 years I've marched. I think that you're referring to, and I'm not sure, but I think you're referring to when I was dealing with some people that said that they don't want to march and that they're going to off people. And I told them there are plenty of people walking around that they called the name. They're not offing anybody because I felt that they were just trying to disrupt our asking people to march. So in the context of I was quoting as I said the reference made about I don't want to march.
And astrology and mathematics before Socrates and them Greek homos ever got around to it. Did you say that, Mr. Sharpton?
I talked about African history, and I talked about how we had dealt with astrology as well as mathematics and philosophy and religion in Africa.
But you referred to people as Greek homos, didn't you?
I do not recall how I referred to anyone. And you'd have to cite.
Do you think that your bigoted statements in 1991 are excusable just because they were in 1991?
I think that any statement that I've made that was wrong, I have clearly said that we should not make bigoted statements, including me. I also think that to distort, I think that also to distort.
Have you made
You
bigoted
can
statements?
ask all the questions you want, but I'm going to answer the question.
Will the gentleman yield? When you call Greek homos, when you talk about white crackers, those are bigoted statements.
I think I made it clear that I was quoting what somebody said. Yelling and getting upset is beneath your office. You should calm down.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
Once again, Mr. Chairman, after a sustained attack on the character of a witness that has been called by people on this panel, and that panel then attacks that witness in a sustained, deliberate manner, which is non-germane to the subject at hand, is it appropriate for a member to ask that the offending member's words be taken down?
It is not under the rules appropriate. The time is the gentleman's.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would note these are highly relevant to the issues that we're facing. Reverend Sharpton has come before the House Judiciary Committee
the clock should be running.
As a purported expert on policing, and yet his bigoted statements undermine the bipartisan work we should be doing to ensure that all citizens are able to come together and have safe communities.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. How is this
Gentleman will state his
germane?
point of order.
How is this line of inquiry germane? And if it's not germane, is it appropriate?
To the point, may I speak to the point?
He cited germane.
Is there such a rule? I don't think we should allow our, Mr. Chairman, we have had a series, we've had a witness who came before us 2 days ago, Mr. Lewandowski, who totally contemptuously dealt with this panel. And now we have a reverse of that. We have one of our members doing the same thing to a witness who we have called. I don't think it is within our best practices to allow our process to get down to the level that we have now sunk. And I'm asking the chairman to, in the wise use of discretion, to rule that the gentleman from Florida's line of inquiry with this specific witness, who he's trying to attack his characters, no question about that, but
I'm reading his own words back.
doing it in a sustained way,
Time, not you.
and
He
doing
does? I have the time, Mr. Chairman.
and not having uttered
What
a
is it?
single
Regular order. Is this a point of order? What is
Point of order, Mr. Gates. You don't have the floor.
The gentleman is being heard on the point of order.
Will I be heard on the point of order?
The gentleman is being heard on the point of order.
not having uttered a single word of relevance to the issue at hand, is it appropriate for this committee to allow the misuse of this platform to attack the character of a witness? I mean, this is taking our process down to a level that we should never allow it to descend to. And I'm objecting to us wallowing in the mud down here with these comments. I mean, it's not whether or not it's true or false, it's the fact that it's non-germane.
To the point.
The chair will rule on the point. The chair will rule on the point of order. Although the gentleman's comments may be obnoxious, although they may
I object to that. Point of order. That is an improper characterization of a member of the
comments
committee.
may be characterized as whatever you want to characterize them as.
I have a point of order that your words be taken down and referred to.
Oh,
woe is me.
Gentleman,
I pick a fight and now I need help.
Under the rules, the gentleman has wide latitude, both on the question of germaneness and on the language that he uses. And unfortunately, under the rules, I cannot overrule him. The gentleman will proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You sold your life story, Mr. Sharpton, to your own charity. How much money did your charity pay you for the rights to tell your story?
Parliamentary inquiry. Mr. Chairman, this is an outrage, and the question is whether you can impugn the motives and or insult or badger the witness or cost or characterize his presence at this table.
The gentlelady was not recognized.
Well, I have a parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chairman.
The gentlelady was not recognized. All right. Stop the clock. Just stop. All right, you'll state the parliamentary inquiry.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the gentleman from Georgia made a point about a witness that we had just 2 days ago, which the impugning of the motive, the character destruction was not in the course of our questioning. What I say to our good friend from Florida, that you are now not only not being germane, but you are pointedly attacking the character, and in addition, bringing up information.
It is not.
That, well, let me just finish. Bringing up information, it's an inquiry. Bringing up information that is a character destroying. The question is, in the questioning of a witness, can you use items that refer to the witness's character and demeaning the witness's character? Is that an appropriate line of questioning?
Whether it is an appropriate line of questioning is not relevant. But with respect to the parliamentary inquiry, questioning a witness's character and motives, which may go to ascertaining the credibility to give to the testimony, we have always given very wide latitude, and the answer has to be that I cannot object to that. The gentleman will proceed.
How much money did your charity pay you personally, for the right to tell your life story?
My charity owed a certain amount of money to me and asked, could they use that money to have the right to sell any rights to my life, be it documentary, one-man play, or other items that they have already began reaping dividends. They would have had to pay me the same sum anyway because it was owed to me.
Was that sum
so
over
the
$500,000?
answer, can I finish?
Was it over $500,000?
Can I finish? Whatever the sum was, the sum, whatever the sum,
to tell your life story? Because I think most people would see that as
charity
a fraud.
again.
It's a straight fraud.
Charity again owed me a certain amount of money that they would have had to pay anyway, and I agreed to allow them,
or less than 500,000 that his charity paid him for his life story.
Time.
I allowed them to use those funds
Chairman, I
to
asked you
have my
was it more than $500,000?
Gentleman will suspend. His time has expired. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the previous speaker, the maker of this amendment, talked about being exhausting. This issue that he has brought before this body and the committee is exhausting. Just this week, the sponsor of this amendment called diversity, equity, and inclusion in the military a, quote, failed experiment. He has called it cancerous. Just this week, a senator from Alabama stated that it was his opinion that white nationalists are not necessarily racist and refused to denounce white nationalists serving in the military. All of this with the backdrop of the same senator holding up hundreds of military nominations, which is actively hurting our national security, something that this NDAA bill would address. To what end? The U.S. Marine Corps does not have a confirmed commandant as we speak. And yet, just an hour ago, on this very floor, one of the members on the other side of this body said his amendment, quote, had nothing to do whether colored people or black people can serve, unquote. Mr. Speaker, these comments show exactly why we need diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Every day, our military grows more diverse, more and more reflecting the diversity of our nation. This amendment does nothing to address the recruitment shortfalls that our services are facing, and instead it will only make it more difficult to recruit Americans on diverse backgrounds representing the true makeup of our nation. What are you so afraid of? Why do you keep bringing these divisive issues to the body of this floor? You are out of order. You are exhausting, Mr. Gates.
The gentleman is no longer recognized. The gentleman is no longer recognized. Woman from Virginia reserves?
I reserve.
Excuse me, a point of order, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
No, Mr. Speaker, I've made a point of order. You have to rule on the point of order.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
The gentleman has an obligation to address the chair, not other members. He did not do that. He was out of order, violating the decorum of the House.
The gentleman has not stated a proper point of order.
A parliamentary inquiry, then. I seek recognition to make a parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman will state his parliamentary.
What is the parliamentary mechanism that requires an individual to address the chair? Because if it's not that, and we can address each other, let's do that for the rest of the debate.
The chair will not engage in this dialogue. Would the gentleman like to be recognized for his 5 minutes?
I want to be recognized for a parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman is not recognized.
I'm not recognized for a parliamentary inquiry? I'm not recognized for a parliamentary inquiry?
The chair will not engage with the gentleman.
I have a parliamentary inquiry.
So the gentleman is recognized for his 5 minutes. The gentleman will state his inquiry.
Will the chair encourage members to address the chair and rather than one another?
The chair encourages all members to address the chair and not one another.
Very well. I seek recognition.
Thank you. The gentleman is recognized.
Mr.
Can you be respectful? Can we have a debate?
Yeah.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the childish antics that we just observed indicate that we've got a lot of work to do, both in this House and the military, not to have radical racial ideology governing our discourse and governing the policy choices that we make in these bills.
Member for 12 minutes for his opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very kindly. With any luck, today marks the end of perhaps the most
spectacular failure in the history of congressional investigations, the effort to find a high crime or misdemeanor committed by Joe Biden and then to impeach him for it. In prior hilarious episodes of this long-running madcap series, America got to see the following. 1, nearly 20 fact witnesses who could not identify a single act of wrongdoing by President Biden, much less a high crime and misdemeanor, and who overwhelmingly testified that Biden was not involved in any of his family's business adventures. 2, 3 expert witnesses called by the majority itself who said nothing that they had seen in the tens of thousands of pages of documents adduced by the majority even remotely approached the level of a high crime and misdemeanor. Bank records which show exactly what all the witnesses told us, that Joe Biden was not involved in his family members' businesses. Repeated voyeuristic displays of pornographic images by the majority, completely irrelevant to any conceivable legislative or investigative purpose. A star witness, Gal Luft, who turned out to be a Chinese agent and an illegal arms trafficker on the run from American justice, and the key piece of evidence which launched the entire zany goose chase, an FD 1023 form in which the FBI duly recorded a completely fictional tip about a $5 million bribe to Vice President Biden peddled by Alex Smirnoff, who has been criminally indicted by a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, Special Counsel David Weiss, for felony counts of systematically lying to the FBI and constructing a false record about Joe Biden, and now sits in jail in California as a flight risk while the world studies his long-standing and extensive ties to Russian intelligence. Today, the good chairman and his ace MAGA detectives have finally jumped the shark. The comedy of errors comes crashing to an end as House Republicans in more than a dozen Biden districts beg for mercy, and the committee throws a flabby Hail Mary pass 3 weeks after the Super Bowl's over. So today, we revisit the fruitless testimony of 2 more fading star witnesses who have failed to testify to any presidential wrongdoing, much less evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors. Both of the majority witnesses are frustrated would-be business partners of Hunter Biden, who tried to leverage the Biden name, or the Biden brand, as they keep calling it. But they never got any business off the ground for reasons that will become painfully obvious to anyone watching the proceedings today. Even Hunter Biden, laboring at the time under a serious substance abuse addiction, could tell these were not the type of people he should be doing business with. So rather than representing the Biden brand, which was their ardent wish, they now show up today as loyal servants of Trump world, each of them proudly represented by their very own former Trump White House attorney. The first is Mr. Bobulinski, the bitterly disappointed wannabe Hunter business partner whose famously litigious history includes unsuccessfully suing his own dying father's charity for nearly $1 million, and just last month suing Cassidy Hutchinson for $10 million after she reported that Mr. Bobulinski, wearing a ski mask, met with Mark Meadows, which Ms. Hutchinson is now backed up with actual documentary photographic evidence, something in very short supply in this investigation. Mr. Bobulinski made his hazy allegations against the Bidens public for the first time at a press conference choreographed by the Trump for President campaign, which provided him a venue, a gaggle of journalists, and even a dress shirt that they went out and bought for him to wear to the event. Hours later, Mr. Bobulinski joined the second 2020 presidential debate as Donald Trump's personal guest, where he was seated with Kid Rock and Mark Meadows. The other star witness, Mr. Galanis, who I believe is appearing by Zoom today, is a serial fraudster and convicted con man, a term I would charitably not use on a witness, except it was explicitly bestowed upon him by not one, but 2 different U.S. federal district court judges, including the one who sentenced him to over 15 years in prison for defrauding union pension funds, a Native American tribe, and scores of innocent investors. Mr. Galanis was sentenced to pay restitution of over $80 million
to his victims. That's a lot of money. That's what Donald Trump was sentenced to pay E. Jean Carroll for in that civil litigation. The very first record of Mr. Galanis's claims against the Biden family appeared, check this out, in the clemency petition that he sent from prison to President Trump. But the key point is this: even if we were to believe every single word offered by these utterly compromised and biased witnesses, Mr. Bobulinski, Mr. Galanis, their allegations don't identify any wrongdoing, much less an impeachable offense by President Biden. With the impeachment bus running on empty, our GO colleagues now are apparently preparing to save face by ending the impeachment farce with criminal referrals. But criminal referrals require evidence of crimes. And the only crimes we have seen are those of the GOP's own star witnesses, like Russian asset Alex Smirnov, Chinese agent Gal Luft, Devin Archer, and Jason Galanis. The minority witness today, our witness, Lev Parnas, casts a piercing light on what's really taking place here. And Mr. Parnas has reason to know. He, too, used to be a mega sycophant peddling lies and disinformation to smear Joe Biden. Today, he joins a long line of self-exiles from Trump world who could no longer stomach all the corruption and deceit. People like Cassidy Hutchinson, people like Michael Cohen, Sarah Matthews, Alyssa Griffin, General James Mattis, the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, General John Kelly, and now Vice President Mike Pence, who refuses to endorse for president the man he served with. But we do have loyal sycophants still in the room, and one day I look forward to hearing their testimony about how they got sunk into this religious cult. Mr. Parnas wrote Chairman Comer and me a remarkable letter on July 23rd, 2023. This is the first time I'm meeting him today. He was Rudy Giuliani's right-hand man, his globe-trotting business partner and language interpreter in the mission to manufacture Ukraine and Burisma-related dirt and smears against Joe Biden in 2018 and 2019. He spent all of his time traveling around the world trying to stage evidence against Joe Biden. In his letter, Parnas explains that the desperate search to find evidence of any kind of Biden corruption was a complete and total bust because there was no evidence to find. He wrote to tell us that not only is there no evidence in Ukraine that Joe Biden did anything improper, but more darkly, the manic search for a smoking gun against Biden became a mission to invent and concoct evidence out of thin air with the active help of Russian intelligence assets and agents. A man, I'm getting to Russia. You haven't heard anything yet, Mr. Chairman. A man who has reckoned with his own moral descent into Trump world. Lev Parnas is ashamed of what he did to serve the interests of Russian propaganda and Putin's lies. And he wants America to know the truth. He can explain how the Russian-stimulated conspiracy theories and lies that he promoted with Rudy Giuliani live on in the tiresome fabrication spread by Alex Smirnov and now repeated by this committee like Pavlov's dog. At every turn, my colleagues cry Russia hoax, even in the face of repeated warnings from Donald Trump's own Treasury Secretary and Secretary of State, from the intelligence community, from Robert Mueller, and most recently from Special Counsel Weiss, who was named to office by Donald Trump. As Secretary Mnuchin stated, quote, Russian disinformation campaigns targeting American citizens are a threat to our democracy. That's Secretary Mnuchin, someone that you guys usually defend, but my GOP colleagues continue to cry Russia hoax like cult members selling flowers at the airport. Our colleagues are the ones loyally amplifying the actual Russian hoax, not the Russia hoax, the Russian hoax, the one that Giuliani and Trump and Smirnov have eagerly adopted from Putin and his agents. They participate in this hoax while they shamefully block $60 billion in military assistance to President Zelensky and the besieged Ukrainian people, 5 years after Trump and Giuliani tried to shake President Zelensky down for counterfeit dirt on Joe Biden. And while they continue to parrot these transparent Russian lies, Vladimir Putin wages his bloody aggressive war on Ukraine filled with atrocities like the mass kidnapping of children and the rape and slaughter of civilians. The MAGA right's wholesale adoption of this Russian hoax and their sellout of the Ukrainian people by the MAGA right is an historic betrayal of democracy, freedom, and the rule of law. But the defense of democracy begins with fidelity to the truth, and the oversight Democrats, America's truth squad against this disinformation, is here today to set the record straight. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
I would now like to introduce our witnesses. Mr. Tony Bobulinski. Mr. Bobulinski was a business